Okay. Madam Chair.
Good evening and welcome to councillors' offices, guests and members of the public watching on YouTube. This is a meeting where the public are allowed to attend. The only time the public may participate is when they've previously been asked to present a petition or ask a question and have informed the community services that they are on and ensured that they are on the list to do so. The meeting will follow the usual format: apologies for absence, declarations of interest by the committee members, and this evening we have 2 items on the agenda. Each speaker will be called out to speak with a time limit of 3 minutes for each person. Councillors have been specially trained and legal government guidelines to follow. Do we have any apologies for absence, please?
Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Matt Ray.
And I think I've just had apologies from Councillor Bob Isles as well. He's having difficulty getting through.
I've got one.
Yes, Councillor Deddy.
Yeah, Judy Kane.
Thank you. And have we got anyone who has any declarations of interest? No, thank you. So I'd now like to move on to application 20/00097/COU, retrospective application for the formation of a secondary access to facilitate the site being divided into 2, each half being served by its own access, the land at Ashley Road, Middleton. And I believe it's Edward who's doing this as the councillors on leave. Is the other officers on leave? We can't hear you, Edward.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee and members of the public. As the Chair kindly outlined in her introduction, this is a retrospective application for the formation of a secondary access to facilitate the division of the subject site into 2 halves. Those 2 halves are then to have their own independent access at Ashley Road, Middleton. Can I have the first slide, please? So the second.
Sorry, Edward. Shall I take you straight there?
Yeah, to the location plan. Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the committee, as you can see, this is the subject site. The site is situated off Ashley Road on the western side of the road, approximately 300 meters to the north of Middleton Village. It's a corner plot bounded to the north and to the east by Ashley Road and by fields to the southern and western boundaries, as can be seen by the location plans. Access to the site is currently gained at the southeastern corner of the site from Ashley Road. Next slide, please. However, the second access has already been created at the northwestern corner of the site, and the subject site faces the Middleton wastewater treatment works. It's directly opposite to the site on Ashley Road, and there is a bungalow approximately 35 meters to the west of the site. The site is already in occupation by the applicant with 3 numbered gypsy pitches, hard standing laid to the whole of the site, and the existing building towards the south of the site has been converted for use as an ancillary amenity building. Electricity and water are already installed, and there are new lighting columns within the site. There is a question of an unlawful development of the site being pursued by the local planning authority's enforcement officer. And my colleague, the enforcement officer, Mr. Dean Biddle, is here to contribute to tonight's presentation and discussions. The proposal is for a retrospective application for the formation of secondary access to facilitate the division of the site into two halves. There will also be, with this retrospective application, submission for the erection of boundary walls and fences and the erection of an ancillary building to the northern half of the site. Next slide, please.
Chair, can I just intervene at this moment? There's a question mark whether we are actually live on YouTube. So I'll ask my colleague, Pauline, to just double check, please. Chair, you're on mute at the moment, Chair.
It was my husband that said it wasn't, but I can see it says live on YouTube here on the corner of my screen.
I'll just ask for wait for my colleague to double check. Apologies for this, but if we're not broadcasting live, then we have to potentially restart the meeting.
We are. I've already checked the YouTube link. It is there.
The YouTube link is there.
Yeah, I've got it on the phone and it's currently broadcasting.
Okay.
I've just had a message. It is from my husband.
Okay. I should explain, if we're not live broadcasting, we can't proceed. So I apologise for that, Chair, but I had that note come through to me. So sorry, Edward, if you'd like to continue.
Thank you, sir. Madam Chair, just to continue before that brief intermission, as it were, to make sure that procedurally we were live, I wanted to draw members of the committee's attention to the key determining issues. And these are effectively set out in this slide. Principle of the development, the design and visual impact of the development, the question of residential amenity, highways, refuse and recycling, flood risk and drainage, and landscaping. Next slide, please. Madam Chair, what you have before you is the indicative drawings of the proposed amenity building, the elevations both of the front and the rear. So you've got the retrospective submission for the two access. You've got the proposal for an additional amenity building, and of course the boundary wall treatment. And as I mentioned earlier, there is already electricity and water, and there are lighting columns on the site. Next slide, please. And this shows you the proposed amenity buildings, both the side elevation and the height of the proposed structures. Next slide, please. And what you have here is the proposed amenity building floor plan. It will basically consist of a utility room, a bathroom, a day room, and a kitchen. Next slide, please. And the proposed boundary wall treatment, as indicated by this sketch, it will be 1.8 meters high, an entrance opening of 5 meters effectively. Next slide, please. We've received, Madam Chair, consultation responses from internal consultees, the local plans team, who are effectively saying that there is a borough-wide need for an additional pitch, and that as the authority is unable to demonstrate a 5-year supply. Their consideration is that we should look at this application favorably, weighed up against the evidence that there may be conflict with certain aspects of the joint core strategy. The environmental services, environmental protection team of the council have suggested conditions relating to reporting of unexpected contamination. Next slide, please. External consultation response were received from Northamptonshire County Council, who effectively say that they can't support the application as it currently stands. The County Council's archaeological officer made no comments. The environmental agency objected to the fact that there was no mains foul drainage system and no further queries were raised by officers. Anglian Water had no comments to make. Northamptonshire Police had no objections to the scheme. Next slide, please. The parish council responses, you had Middleton Parish Council who objected on the grounds of highways and the fact that they feel that the proposal will lead to an intensification of the site and may possibly give rise to problems to do with waste management and drainage, given the fact that there are unauthorized developments and landscaping, in their view, taking place already on the site. Ashley Parish Council objected on the grounds of a number of caravans on the site, again on the question of intensification of the use of the site, waste management, drainage, and again highlighting the fact that there may well be unauthorized developments going on the site. Although not consulted, the Cottingham and East Charlton Parish Council has objected to the officer's report. It's important for you to note, Madam Chair, that they are outside, if you like, the jurisdiction of the local planning authority. Next slide, please. We've had third-party responses to the scheme. Neighbours objected on the grounds, and these are material planning grounds, highway safety concerns, and raised the question that the proposal would lead to an increase in traffic and would be dangerous to effectively the proximity of the bend in the road to the free flow of traffic safely on that bend. They raised concerns about drainage and the fact that the applicant was also seeking in this particular application for further hard standing to be allowed on the site. They raised concern that the disposal of sewage would be problematic, the design of the boundary fence and removal of the existing hedgerow was not advisable. There would be harm to the visual amenity of the surrounding area, and that the scheme was against planning policy. It would lead to environmental damage, and that there would be increased noise and pollution and the overdevelopment of the site, also with the poor management of waste. Next slide, please. The position of the officer's report in conclusion is that the retrospective application for the formation of the secondary access facilitating the site being divided into two halves, served along an existing road and having additional hard standing and the erection of walls and fences and an ancillary building in the northern half of the site, on balance, is acceptable. It is important, Madam Chair and members of the committee, to note that officers have identified a number of key material planning considerations that favour the favourable disposal of this application, principally the planning history of the site. It's important to note, Madam Chair, that the history of the site runs with the land and not the applicant, and therefore it's prudent upon us as a local planning authority and you as the decision makers to take note of the appeal decision of 2009 and 2013, which basically establish the acceptability of the use of the site for travellers. So the issue about the use is, in planning terms, settled. And the officer's view is that the application in relative comparison for the creation of additional pitch and the subdivision of the site is not going to lead to an adverse impact on neighbours and the surrounding area. Madam Chair, the officer's view is that, firstly, the use is existing as a traveller's site. It's established by virtue of the previous appeal decisions. Policy 31 of the Joint Core Strategy, protecting existing lawful sites, favours this scheme. And also the fact that you have two appeal decisions of 2009 and 2013 support this proposal. It's important to note that the MPPF gives support to the scheme, and the harm, the benefits of having this proposal is outweighed by the harm. In essence, the benefit of the scheme in that it allows the authority to meet its deliverability of Gypsies and Travellers site. At the moment, it's not able to meet the 5-year supply. The scheme makes a positive contribution to that. The applicant has 2 favourable appeal decisions that run with the land. And on balance, the views of officers is that this scheme should be approved. We have 17 conditions attached to this consent if it was resolved by members to accept the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Can we go to the first speaker, Mr. Mike Curtis, please? You have, you're muted. You will have 3 minutes to speak, Mike.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes,
I'm
thank
Mike
you.
Curtis. I represent the Cottingham Middleton copy holders who hold round close the field next door to the site in trust. This is the field which is directly neighbour to the site in question. The many prejudicial impacts on our land are: a healthy hedge was removed adjoining their boundary and were replaced by a 2-metre high fence without permission. An ancient stone wall to east of the gateway has been removed to enable their splay at the entrance to be enlarged. This has impacted on our access. The foot of the new fence is about 1.5 metres above our land level, as they've added a considerable amount of hardcore. The fence now encroaches on our property by about 2.5 metres and has a dogleg shape. If you look at the location plan, which you showed earlier, it shows a dead straight line on their boundary. Also, on Google Earth in 2018, there's a good picture of the site showing a straight hedge. Starting November 2019, we've been in touch with the planning enforcement officer to advise him of the ongoing developments. The increased height and encroachment have added to the flooding of our field. This field has previously been let for grazing. We're no longer able to do that. Having visited the site last week and walked the perimeter, there was strong evidence of a raw sewage outfall with no connection to the main sewer. There's also a matrix of blue water plastic pipe in the field, all again without permission. In summary, fencing is not in keeping with the rural setting of the Welland Valley, nor is it an attempt at landscaping. We're now having to defend our property and spend money on a new cattle fence to prevent further encroachment and create a new gateway to enable vehicle access. The mission of the copyholder since 1612 is to support local people and projects in a constructive and beneficial way. Sadly, our current efforts and time are being spent on this unnecessary situation. Along with the Environment Agency's objections and other interested parties, we expect the Development Control Committee to refuse this retrospective planning application.
Thank you. That was perfect timing. Could we have Mr. Van Oppen, please?
Mr. Van Oppen, I think you've muted yourself, sir. I haven't got you on mute. I think you need to do something yourself. Shall we go to the next speaker, Madam Chair? Well, Mr. Van Oppen, it's Councillor Morgan.
Yes, Councillor Morgan, would you like to take over, please?
Yes, hello. I'm Anne Morgan and I represent Ashley Parish Council. Ashley Parish Council would not normally comment on an application in another parish, but in this case there is sufficient strength of feeling amongst the residents of the village about the inappropriate nature of this development. The issues we would wish to raise are as follows. 1. The new site access is very close to a sharp bend on a narrow country road with no verge. This, given the frequent use of this road, not only by cars, but also horse riders, joggers and cyclists, is a cause for concern in itself. But when you also consider the potential for an increase in traffic coming in and out of this site, in particular caravans, the risk for a serious accident is increased yet further. Several near misses have been noted by local residents, people from Ashley included, and many have come to view this section of road as hazardous. We note that the Highways Agency has objected to this application on the basis of that the visibility displays for the access are insufficient. 2. The application proposes an amenity building which currently has no connection to foul water drainage, and we note that this effluent has been discharged into a neighbouring field. This is clearly unacceptable and constitutes grounds for refusal, a view that is upheld by the Environment Agency. 3. The application states in its section on appearance and landscaping that development will not change the appearance of the land or significantly affect its character, nor will the proposed development have an unacceptable impact on the surrounding locality. The replacement of native hedging with 2-metre high fencing and the installation of an imposing entrance and large areas of hard standing belie the veracity of that claim, and this we feel represents additional grounds for refusal of this application. In sum, the Parish Council considers that the suboptimal access arrangements and the serious adverse impact of this site on the character and appearance of the local area means that this development does not fulfil the criteria of Policy 31 of the Joint Core Strategy. And furthermore, we do not consider it to constitute sustainable development. Finally, given the retrospective nature of this application, which is disappointing in itself, we would ask that in considering this application, clear restrictions are put in place in relation to any future unauthorised development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We can go now to Mr. Van Oppen. Can we hear you?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. We just replaced you then. We didn't waste any time.
Well, I'm not as prepared as Mr. Curtis or Mrs. Morgan. Thank you and well done. I'm speaking as a neighbour. We have an equine business and farming business and event business next door to the applicant. I've known the applicant for a long time. I would actually consider him a friend, Miles, and his children particularly. We have actually an enormous amount of fun with them. So this is a difficult one for me. But I'm afraid, and I have told Miles this has really started to impact on our business and our wildlife and conservation program that we run on the farm. So it's the intensification of use that I'm particularly concerned about. We've touched on highways. There's no question that the new access, in fact, the first access as well, is dangerous practically and doesn't conform with the highway rules. So how that's used is beyond me, and I've personally nearly collided with 2 vehicles coming out of that entrance. But with what we're doing a lot of wildlife and conservation work. We've planted probably 3 kilometres of hedgerows. We've planted shelter belts, woodlands. We record all the wildlife on the farm. We've got otters on camera. We've got meadow pippins, pied wagtails, bullfinches, everything going on. And it's extremely important to us. And what we've noticed with the hedges that have been pulled out recently, we've got tawny owls nesting in the field next door to us, which they stripped with a bulldozer, the ancient pasture, which is a great shame, and taken hedgerows out, which is a huge shame. And this is impacting on the wildlife generally in the area, which we really care for. We also run a very much sustainable business. We use all our materials for fencing materials and building materials. So it's a great pity to us. We've been planting trees for 50 years. My father started 50 years ago planting trees. I planted many as a boy, and we use all those materials for fencing, etc., building things on the farm. And so it's this urban design intensification of use next door that worries us. We know that they've got plans to expand. I've been approached by the applicant to buy our field, offered well over double the agricultural value, potentially more, for I suspect looking at the track record, a larger development of mobile homes which they'll let. So you know, this is a concern for us, but if we're offered double and this is all allowed and continues, then you know, you join them. I mean, so that's a concern.
Can you round up, please?
And then with our most of our clients are children and ladies, and we're losing business because of what's happening next door. They're concerned about their safety, not that they've done anything wrong, but they are concerned about the safety because of the intensification of use. We also work with children who come to us who are in full-time care as well from Corley.
I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to. Okay, thank you very much.
Nice.
We now go to Councillor David Grayson, please.
Muted. Thank you.
Yeah.
There. Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, notwithstanding the policy statement about protecting gypsy and traveller sites in the Northamptonshire Core Strategy, it's our belief that the majority of those policy statements have simply not been adhered to, on top of the retrospective nature of this application. It's our view that it's not appropriate to increase the number of traveller sites outside Middleton. There is already a site on the edge of Cottingham, and approving a third would make 3 sites surrounding 2 small villages. It is inconceivable to believe that this would not have a disproportionate impact on these villages. Yet we have no evidence that an impact assessment has actually been carried out. Approval of a second site on Ashley Road would be an over-intensification of development on a small plot of land. The introduction of hard standing on the original site and the new site has reduced the possibility of natural drainage and greatly increased the risk of flooding on the road. This hardcore surfacing, along with the high wooden fences and gates, is out of keeping with the local character of the locality, as is the proposal for a 1.8 metre high boundary wall, which gives this site an urban feel contrary to the criteria for new traveller and gypsy site allocations. A particular serious concern is that the application is contradictory about its plans for such an important issue as the discharge of foul sewage. The inadequacy of the foul water drainage arrangements has been identified by the Environmental Agency, and as a reason for objection, this application should be rejected on those grounds. The application fails on the grounds of highway safety. The new site has an access very close to a right-angle bend on a narrow country road, and if approved would lead to independent site gates either side of a blind bend. Added to the access to the water treatment works is opposite and at the apex of the bend, and there is a high preponderance of horse riders, cyclists and joggers using this road. This could make it a very dangerous piece of road with a high risk of accidents. We note that the Highways Agency has raised those concerns regarding the adequacy of the displays of the newly constructed access for this reason. Additionally, the lights installed at the new entrance also pose a danger to traffic, as they could be mistaken for headlights. There is a considerable strength of feeling within the villages of Cottingham and Middleton regarding the inappropriate nature of this application, given the location of the site, and we are advised that the application does not meet the majority of the criteria for the site and the gypsy and traveller sites as outlined in the Northamptonshire Core Strategy. We would therefore urge the committee to reject it.
Thank you. Could I ask Councillor Sarah Brandt to speak, please? Can't hear you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for giving me time to speak on behalf of the residents of Middleton. The first thing to say is that this is not just an application to increase the number of pitches on an existing site. The application creates a second new site with its own entrance, and it doesn't comply with the majority of the criteria detailed in Policy 31 of the Joint Core Strategy. The planning policy for traveller sites sets out the definition that needs to be met by those applying for permission for a new site, and we see nothing in this application that demonstrates why this should be considered a gypsy and traveller application. If approved, this application will double the number of traveller sites on the edge of Middleton. With the new meadow site at the other end of Cottingham, the two villages are already surrounded, and this would be an increase by 50% and would be totally disproportionate. We've seen no assessment of the impact on our small village of the additional traveller site, and this hasn't been addressed by the applicant. Corby's local plan states that water recycling centres are bad neighbours, and the Middleton sewage works is directly across the road. There's no current odour assessment report with this application, and vans on the new site would be nearer to the sewage works than those on the original site agreed in 2009. This is not a suitable location for a second traveller site. The access visibility displays, other people have mentioned, they don't meet highway requirements. The only way that they can is by encroaching on land owned by the copyholders. The sewage arrangements are appalling. They don't meet Environment Agency requirements, and it has objected. And this basically means the proposal doesn't meet criterion D of Policy 31. The new site has had a very inverse impact on the rural character of the landscape. This is in direct contravention of criterion H of Policy 31. The 2-metre high wooden fences, gates, hard landscaping give the impression that the site and its occupants are isolated and deliberately cut off, and I quote there, "This is contrary to the planning policy for traveller sites as referenced in national policy guidance." The application is riddled with errors and contradictions which give a misleading impression of the development, and our parish council would be shocked if an application so full of inaccurate information were to be approved by this committee. In summary, the application doesn't meet the majority of the criteria for the siting of gypsy and traveller sites. It doesn't have local resident support or the support of the local MP. or the support of the 4 local parishes. Neither is it supported by the highways or environment agencies. We therefore urge the Development Control Committee to refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you. I have several questions myself, but I'll allow others. Is Edward, is Dean here to help answer questions?
He is, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillors, do we have any?
Councillor Addison, Madam Chair.
Councillor Addison.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened carefully to what the officers have had to say tonight about this application, and I have, I think, 4 questions, if I may, Chair. The first one, the officer said about the appeals that the applicant has won in the past. However, Madam Chair, I note that that was for 3 plots on the site. This seems to imply that they're going to put more caravans or mobile homes on this site. So I don't think that, in my opinion, Madam Chair, that the fact that they've won 2 appeals, I don't think that holds much water with me. The second one is the paddock owned by the copy holders. There's mentioned in the report about 2 pipes that go into this field. What are those pipes for? Is that for sewage waste? And if so, that's unacceptable. And the other one was about the access to the highway. That's not a very safe bend. So I have grave concerns about that. I think that's all, Madam Chair. At this moment in time.
If you'd like to come back now, Edward.
Okay, Madam Chair, if I could ask the enforcement officer probably to just make a small contribution, because he has captured some of these issues. So, Dean, are you there?
Yes, I am, Edward. Thank you.
Please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, I think the one of the main things that needs to be considered here is that the site is already established. The principle of development has already been established by those previous appeal permissions. Looking through the report, I think the officer has addressed a lot of the concerns that have been raised by the local parishes and the local residents. There are some quite stringent and robust conditions that the officer, in working with myself as well, we will be putting towards this permission should the committee deem it to be acceptable. And that is something obviously that we will ensure is come through. With regards to drainage, I have personally seen 3 tanks sunk on site to deal with foul sewage. There are other issues that we can go back with regards to the possibility of linking up to main sewage. That is an option within the proposal, and certainly that is something again that we could possibly condition should committee seek to approve. My planning colleague also within his report did address the issues from a highways point of view with regard to the existing access that was part of the original permission and the impact of the second access. There's been a lot of talk about it being a second site. Well, effectively, it's the addition of a further pitch, and I think the officer in his report has addressed those concerns and also made perfectly clear the fact that the inspectorate didn't deem any specialist conditions with regards to the access, visibility displays and whatever, and he deemed that access to be acceptable at that time. Again, like I said, I think the the officer has covered quite competently the possibility of robust conditions being attached to it to address a lot of the concerns that have been raised.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Madam Chair, I just wanted to add that the reason why we've cited the two appeal decisions of 2009 and 2013 is because they are material. And the two inspectors that looked at the appeal for this particular site took the access issue into consideration. And as my colleague, the enforcement officer, has said, the use is established. It's not the creation of a new traveller site. It is the subdivision of the site effectively by way of a further access point and the erection of a boundary wall and erection of fences. The issue of sewage and foul water, as the enforcement officer has said, that can be dealt with by way of conditions, and there are 17 conditions that are clearly tied to measures of enforceable control on this site. So we have been diligent enough to take into consideration the concerns, the material planning considerations and concerns of objectors, and address them in the report, and further, if you like, ensure that controls are enforceable. And that's why we've had close workings with the enforcement officer on this particular application. Madam Chair, that's it.
Please, because we keep talking about these conditions being enforced. How are these being enforced? If you can't, if the site has been developed without planning permission, without any comment, how can we be sure that should this go through, that these conditions, how would they be enforced?
Madam Chair, it's a very good question, and that's why I think we've effectively devoted and alerted the enforcement officer's time to monitoring this site. So the way that it's we will do what is called a condition compliance check. Condition compliance check, so that there will be, those conditions will be discharged. There will be applications made by the applicant to have those conditions, those 17 conditions, formally discharged, and that will be by way of bringing the details to do with sewage and foul water treatment on the site, and the issue of the boundary treatment and so on.
But what if they don't comply to this?
Then we've got the enforcement arm of the local planning authority to ensure that we take formal enforcement proceedings against the applicant.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from, sorry, I interrupted you, Edward. Did you?
No, Madam Chair, that's fine. I hope I've answered all your questions and the questions of Councillor Addison as well.
Do we have any?
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
Councillor Dady wishes to speak.
I'll take Councillor Dady, then Councillor Watt.
Right, yes, thank you. It's more expressing an opinion than a question, but I thought I ought to state it before I vote. Personally, having looked at all the details this evening, heard from our speakers and so on, I think there's too many things against this application for me to support it. And I don't like to go against the professional opinion of officers, but there seems to be so many local residents who don't want this, and I think it's important to try and stand up for the views of everybody. And so I think I'm going to have to vote against this.
Councillor Watt.
Thank you, Chair. It doesn't seem suitable for the setting here. I understand that we have let our rural communities down with our lack of 5-year land supply for these things, but that is our fault, and we can't allow development to just go ahead because we haven't got that supply. This is the cart before the horse. I think that this will just be the thin end of the wedge. It's a large site. Clearly they will want to come back and place more caravans or dwellings upon this site. The access to it is totally unsuitable on that bend. And so I can't support it.
Thank you. Do we have any?
Councillor Latter.
Councillor Sims and Councillor Latter. Councillor Sims, do you want to go first?
Thank you.
And then
Thank
Councillor
you, Chair. I've got a number of issues. I've got a couple of questions, or a question, a number of issues I want to raise. And that, first of all, on page 1 of the report, it talks about the unlawful development. I know we've heard from the officer concerned in the enforcement, and that, but I'd like to know what actions was taken when they did contravene this. Is the first thing I'd like to ask. And there's a number of issues that have been raised tonight by other members and, of course, the public and people who have spoke this evening, which I mostly agree with, and that, but there are some stronger points. Now, initially, and that we're talking about, it does go against policy. Yes, I accept that there has been appeals that have gone through, and that which makes it more difficult than to object to this proposal. However, you can still object, and I think if it went to appeal, we would have a fighting chance of winning an appeal. First of all, the highways did, all right, they didn't object, but they certainly made comments, and there is engineering solutions to a degree to sort out certain issues that are raised. Highways have before, and on a few occasions, I'm not saying all locally, but I've certainly put some schemes forward that I would raise a question, and certainly other professionals have raised questions before and have gone to appeal, and the authorities have lost on that, and also won on that. So there is a fighting chance. Highways, I do believe it will increase traffic along there. I think it could be, we all know that nationally, statistics, there's more accidents on country roads than they are on any other type of road. So therefore, with the amount of pedestrians and horse riding and etc. goes around there near a bend, I think it's unacceptable. And I also believe the environment, I support what the environment said, and that in relation to, it's not connected to a main sewer, there is a higher risk of pollution. And for that reason, it's a very strong reason in respect of this to object to it. And that, and to be honest with you, it's quite disappointing, in fact, and that Edward did mention in his presentation, and that the fact that this would go some way into, going towards our, where we haven't demonstrated a 5-year land supply, and that for travellers. So this would go to meet some of that need by allowing this to happen. That's unacceptable, really, in my view, because the simple fact is we need to go to consultation with the public to make sure we get acceptable sites that do meet our need, but not by forcing something on the public, which is what we're trying to do this evening. Now, I'm going to tell you now, I've read through this report, I've listened to all the comments, and I'm going to object to this proposal this evening. And I would like to say, and I would like all this minuted, please, if I may, I'm very disappointed in the council and that put us in this position by trying to force through to the public, by not having the 5-year land supply. We could have addressed this a long time ago and you chose not to. That's not right. We wouldn't be in this position this evening if this was sorted.
Can I come back to you on that, Councillor
Oh,
Sims?
of course you can, yes.
Just before lockdown, Councillor
Yes.
Pengelly, Councillor Addison and myself, we went to inspect the council-run travellers' sites, and there are 2 plots vacant on there, and we were planning improvements to the current situation, and we had some of this in hand. So it's not entirely true that we haven't got a 5-year land supply, because it was actually, but unfortunately when we had lockdown it sort of knocked everything on the head. But I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Can I come back on that, please?
Yeah, sure.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, thank you for that comment, Chair. And I take that on board what you said. However, my comment still stands, because this could have been done quite some time ago. Although we tried to do it before lockdown, it's obviously very unfortunate, and that and no one could have planned. No one knew what COVID was on the horizon. But this should have been done a few years ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Did you want to come back on this issue, Ian? Because we've got Councillor Latter next.
Yeah, just to provide some clarity quickly, Chair, the issue around the 5-year land supply is something that changed relatively recently as part of the local plan 2, and the evidence base that was needed to submit that. One thing that was determined quite late in the day, there was a need to refresh the evidence base as it related to gypsy and travellers and the site accommodation needs. So that information's only really been known in the last 6 to 9 months that effectively that we have got a 5-year land supply. Up until that point, we did have a 5-year land supply. So it isn't something that's been known for a long length of time. And I have been working with local plan officers about what options there might be to address that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Latter.
Yes, I would just like to say that, you know, the highways, I don't know where they're coming from when you say that road is safe enough. I go that road maybe at least twice a month, 3 times a month, and it is a bit naughty there. And also there, if this if the chap was offered double the money for his field, if things change in the future, I would hate to think what would happen there with this guy if he ever got hold of enough land. And I certainly will be against it.
Thank you. Councillor Sims.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back on Ian Smith's comments, if I may. I'll take on board what he said about the 5-year land supply coming to being 6 months ago. However, I don't disrespect what he says, but I would like to see evidence of that, because it was talked about. I heard it mentioned probably about 18 months ago about there's going to be an issue with this. So I'd like to see that. And also, as I said before, I would want to go against this mainly on highways and environmental. And as we all know, the Environmental Agency did object to this proposal.
Thank you. Actually, I can come back on that, because we did have a briefing, Councillor Sims, with the travellers, and that's when Councillor Addison and Councillor Pengelly and myself went forward. Yes, can we have our legal expert, please, Stephen James? We can't hear you, darling.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Just 3 quick points. While it's not for me to lay down what members do or don't debate, I think we've made issue and raised issue about local plan and land supply. This isn't the local plan committee. We have an application before us, and members quite rightly can vote whichever way they wish to vote. Secondly, picking up the vibe of what members have said so far, it may well be that members are minded to refuse this application. And if they do, I have to remind them of my usual warning about the fact that there may be a cost implication to the council in doing so. Another point of clarification I'd like to give, which I hope would be helpful, is reference has been made to the previous appeal decisions. And forgive me, somebody was reasonably dismissive of the fact that they didn't see that those appeal decisions were particularly relevant. However, in planning terms, they are relevant because it's already established this as a site for travellers, gypsies, whatever the term you want to use is. And my understanding, and Edward can correct me if I'm wrong on this, one of the original appeals was about the safety and the visibility displays of the original access. That's my understanding. And as I understand it, both appeals were won by the applicant. So we would be on reasonably weak ground to refuse a decision unless we had robust material considerations, and the officer's report wouldn't reflect that.
Thank you. Councillor Watt.
I just wanted to say this isn't an anti-traveller opinion decision. This is a development decision. This is about the council controlling development and not individuals forcing the council's hand and presenting it with a fait accompli. So I wholeheartedly support the expansion of our traveller accommodation, but it should be controlled by the council.
Thank you, Kevin. I quite agree. And I take on board what you said, Stephen, but equally so, we cannot go on. This is my feelings alone. We cannot go on letting people, any people, I'm a strong supporter of the travellers, always have been, but we cannot let individuals threaten us by taking us to court, and then we refuse and they win, and then it just could go on ad infinitum and we could have no control whatsoever. I think sometimes we just have to take a stand, and that's how I feel at this moment. Do we have any other questions, feelings? Councillor Sims?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to agree with what was said earlier, and that yes, the principle of development in a way has been set, and that by the appeal decisions previously, and we have to, when we object to, as you know, Chair, and everyone, I'm sure everyone on the committee knows, we have to look at material considerations. And yes, there is, if we were to lose this, there would be a cost to the authority. But as you pointed out, and that we have to make a stand, and that at some point in our life, and we have to look at what we can object to. I believe we have a fighting chance on environmental issues, and the fact, although the principle of the development has been established, although it could be argued that it's only a small amount, you're adding to the sewerage, you're adding to the traffic, although by only a small amount, it's still significant. How much that's going to increase in real terms. So with that in mind, I think we do have a fighting chance, and I'm willing to take that risk for the members of the public. And I believe we need to move forward and make sure that we go in consultation. I agree with what Councillor Watt said, that we do need to have sites available for the travelling community.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Chair, Councillor Addison wishes to come in.
Councillor Addison?
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back in. Planning regulations and planning law is there for a reason. And I think what you quite rightly were putting out is that without them, people could just build willy-nilly wherever they wanted to, and that would be unsafe for all our communities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Oh, we seem to have, has Anne Brown come in or gone out? She's in.
Yeah, I have to advise Councillor Brown that she missed certain amount of the debate there. So I would have to caution against her possibly participating in the vote, I'm afraid. Whilst I appreciate you heard most of it, I think you missed some important points that were being made. So unfortunately, I think you need to abstain when we get to the vote.
Did you hear?
Anyway, so
Sorry? Okay.
I had made my decision on that anyway, but that's fine.
Thank you.
Right. Have we got any more questions, comments, feelings on this issue?
I don't think anybody else wishes to speak, Madam Chair.
Right. Do we have, if I'm judging the feeling right, do we wish to vote on refusal of this application? Or do we want to, yeah. Stephen, I know you'll advise me the correct format, sorry. It's not often I get the chance to do this, but please guide me.
Okay, Stephen's
Chair,
yeah.
as you'll already know this in any event, we need the committee to vote on a proposal. So I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm often told I am.
Oh, you're usually right, Stephen, not me.
If somebody in the committee would like to propose refusal and have a seconder, we could have a vote on that. Or alternatively, we could vote on approving it, and then we would have to have another vote on refusing it, should it go in the way of refusal.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Thank
Stephen.
you for your guidance as always.
Councillor Addison wishes to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Just trying to think of the words that I need to say. Madam Chair, I propose that we refuse this application.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Smith?
Yeah, I would be happy to second that motion.
And I will take it to a vote.
Julie, may I ask something?
Yes.
So just to make sure we're all voting on the right thing, if, for instance, I voted for, I'm actually voting against the development happening. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. You're voting for to refuse.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Or against to accept. Okay. Yeah. Right. I'll start with Councillor Watt.
For.
Councillor Brown, we have to ask you to abstain, I think, because you were absent. Councillor Paul Beattie, did you hear? Was he here all the time?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, Councillor, I didn't have a big enough screen. Are you for the proposal to refuse? Councillor Sims, are you for or against the proposal to refuse?
For.
Councillor Latter, are you for or against the proposal to refuse?
For to refuse.
Councillor Ferguson, are you for or against the proposal to refuse?
For to refuse.
Councillor Dady? For. Thank you.
For.
Sorry, I'm quickly going through everybody. Councillor Addison, are you for or against the proposal to refuse?
For refusal.
And I think there's just me left. Am I right there, Paul?
Yes, I think so.
I'm for the refusal of the proposal. Thank you.
Okay, Madam Chair, just to confirm that application has not gained approval and has been refused. Stephen James wants to come in, Madam Chair.
Come in, Stephen.
Sorry to interrupt again, Chair. Can we please have reasons for refusal?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do I have to do them or do we all have to do them individually?
Well, I would imagine my start point would be, well, obviously, and I know the committee knows all of this, but I'll say it again and take the brickbats later. They have to be material considerations.
Yeah.
My start point would, in courtesy, be with the proposer and the seconder, because the implication is, should it go to appeal, the proposer and seconder may be called to give evidence.
Okay. So, so we asked.
Councillor Addison moved and Councillor Sims seconded.
Yeah. Councillor Addison.
On the highways and on the environmental issues, Chair, and possibly on overdevelopment of the site.
Thank you. And Councillor Sims, what are your reasons for seconding the refusal?
So sorry, Chair, I was just getting my mouse to work.
That's okay. I know that feeling.
It's not me. I actually would agree with what was I was just going to say what was actually said. The strongest grounds, in my view, would be the environmental issues and, of course, the highways, although that's a bit weaker. But the environmental would be my first choice.
Thank you. Is that enough, Stephen? Have I done or do we all have to do it? No, that's great.
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. So therefore, I'm sorry, officers, but this proposal has been refused.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Sorry, can I invite our public speakers if they'd like to withdraw now from the meeting, and you can watch the rest of the proceedings on YouTube if you so wish. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you to the speakers. Have we lost? Oh, it's just Mike trying to leave.
Right, I left for him.
Thank you. Right, so we now go to the second item on the agenda, and
Ian Smith,
yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
to introduce the item in relation to the section 106 deed of variation land south of Longcroft Road.
Yes, thank you. Over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for a deed of variation to the section 106 agreement to land south of Longcroft Road in Little Stanion. The applicant seeks acceptance of the case for the scheme as consented under planning permission reference number 1700702 DPA and 1700703 OUT is altered to remove the roof tax and the potential overage that has been part of the current planning obligation since August 2016. I'm going to ask members to consider a potential adjournment of this item, and the reason I'm going to ask for that adjournment, Chair and members, is that we've received a very late objection from Northamptonshire County Council. Now, the relevance of that is that it's Northamptonshire County Council, principally the education and highways element of Northamptonshire County Council, that is principally impacted by the proposed changes in the section 106. So basically, officers really are requesting some further time to consider that objection in detail and to basically discuss that objection in detail with the County Council and with the applicant, as has been requested by the County Council in their letter of objection. So on that basis, Chair, I would like members to consider an adjournment of this item. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Oh, yes.
Can I ask my colleague if he means adjournment or deferment?
I would say, apologies, Madam Chair, I'd be asking for a deferment of this item.
Deferment. Thank you. Do I have a proposer to defer this?
Right, several hands went up, yeah. Madam Chair. I think Councillor Ferguson may have got there perhaps slightly first.
Got there by a nanosecond. And can we have a seconder?
Councillor Sims, Madam Chair.
Right, I'll go through onto the vote. Councillor Addison, do you vote for a deferment or against?
For.
Councillor Latter?
For.
Councillor Sims?
For.
Councillor Watt?
For.
Councillor Brown?
For.
Councillor Dady?
For.
Councillor Ferguson?
For.
Councillor Riley, for. So-
Councillor Beattie,
Oh, wait.
Madam Chair.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see him on there. Councillor Beattie?
For.
Sorry,
For.
Paul, you didn't come up on my screen. I do apologise. That's twice now. Much apologies. So the proposal of a deferment of this application has gone through. And that, I think, closes the meeting. I thank you all for coming and for a very challenging meeting. And thank you, officers, for your hard work. And Paul, I think you can turn off.
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
Madam Chair, I will do that.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, officers.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.